Hello to anyone watching this. So earlier in the year I watched multiple multi-hour long videos about Community, and a couple weeks later I found that I was able to watch the entire show on my local streaming service ITVX. So I binged the entire thing and oh my god, is it worth every bit of praise it gets. Pretty much every single episode has a perfectly tight script, amazing direction, cool concept, and a lot of the times gimmick. Just everything about it is so incredible, but my absolute favourite part of the show and the true heart of it is its characters. So today I just wanted to rank every single main character from the show, based on how well I think they were overall used throughout their time, how many funny jokes I think they had, but most importantly I think in terms of how well I can relate to them, because at the end of the day each of these characters represent an archetype that sort of is in some ways seen in real life, and obviously I can identify with a good few of them. So, you know, I think that's the main factor. This is quite a heartfelt thing, just like most of the show. But before I start talking about these main characters, I should probably establish who I actually think is a main character. Now, for me, this is someone who has an established seat at the study table over a prolonged period of time. So, while I'd love to talk about people like Vicky, Neil, or Ice Cube Head, you know, they were only ever given a seat at the table for the series finale, so I can't really count that. You know, these should be people who have a seat for around a season at the very least, although there are obvious exceptions that feel like they were there for at least a season. You'll know what I mean. Also, I'm going to be talking about storylines, character traits, and general events in a way that will only make sense if you're at least in the same position as me, where you've watched the entire show at least once. So if you've not done that yet and you're genuinely interested about what I have to say about all these characters, you know, go give all 100 plus episodes a good punt. I can guarantee you'll have a good time as long as you aren't traumatized by your educational period. But anyway, let's get on with it. There are only two characters that I really dislike, each for quite distinct personal reasons, but quite firmly at the bottom for me is Duncan. I never really liked anything about this character. Like, in seasons 1 and 2, he was pretty much just a miserable drunk bastard the entire time, and brought down the mood in pretty much any scene he was in. Like, especially the episode where Shirley gave birth, I just felt like he was the worst part of that, and if he wasn't there, it would have been a much improved episode, you know, even better than it already was. So then he disappeared for a couple seasons, but he came back in season 5, snatched up the chair next to Jeff, and we were just sort of stuck with him for the next 13 episodes. And especially in episodes like Bondage and Base Male Sexuality, he just came off like a total creep, and especially after that point I just did not care for anything that he was doing. He just felt like wasted space and script lines, and he's played by John Oliver, which is probably the worst aspect of his character. So while he's the only character that I'm 100% negative about, I don't really have too many positives to say for Chang. Like, he truly was not well utilised since he was the study group's teacher, and even then, apart from a few iconic moments in season 1, I never really felt like he added much as the Spanish teacher. Like, yeah, we did get a couple layers to him unravelled when Jeff tried to get to know him, and that was well appreciated, but apart from that, it just didn't feel like much really happened with him. And then when he lost his job in season 2, he was just moping about and trying to join the group in ways that I never really found that endearing. And then we get to season 3 with the whole Chang dynasty thing, and like, yeah, I can understand why people thought the show really fell off at season 4, but I think the drop started at the end of season 3, quite frankly. Like, yeah, the show's never exactly been entirely realistic, but my god, the length that it went to try and convince us that the Chang dynasty was an actual thing that could plausibly happen, I just didn't like it. Like, yeah, the whole episode taking him down and all the spy stuff was quite cool, but just the entire storyline around that I really hated, and seeing him have that much of an ego just did absolutely nothing for me. And then you have the quite pointless Changnesia in season 4, which was obviously not like the main creator's fault. Like, he didn't exactly want Changnesia to happen, and it was thankfully forgotten in season 5. And to be fair, I think the latter third of the show was Chang's best period. It was very much the sort of role I was hoping he would fulfill, where he was just sort of there being comic relief, where nobody really took him seriously, and thank God nobody had to take him seriously. So, you know, a lot of downs and not many ups, but I can at least say that I don't detest everything about him. So now that we've gotten past those two, we can get to the characters that I truly love. Like, everybody from here I'm pretty much entirely positive on. It's just more so the overall way that their character was used that might put someone above or below someone else. You know, I just want to make it clear that no matter what I say, I do really appreciate everyone that I talk about from this point. So let's get to Annie. Like, I do think she's an incredibly sweet character with really nice connections to pretty much everyone else in the main study group. Like, especially the episodes focusing on her moving in with Troy and Abed, I really enjoyed as a sort of exploration of her connection with those two. I just feel like overall she didn't really get as many compelling storylines as pretty much anyone else after season 1. Like, this may be a slightly controversial take, but I kind of did like all of the Sophie Love stuff in season 1, so to see that sort of taken out of focus, it sort of left her in the dust slightly, from my perspective at least. Like I said, she did have so many amazing stories after that. It's just something about seeing her get on with Jeff and see all these different love rivals that I found incredibly compelling, and I feel like that was very much missed from her character later on. Like, obviously there were plenty of other points where they did focus on it in different and unique ways, but I don't know, I just feel like I liked the way that season 1 did it the most. Next is Britta, who I think is in the same sort of camp as Annie, where after season 1 her overall focuses as a character were entirely shifted, except this did result in her basically becoming an entirely different character. But to be fair, I do think there are merits to both of her portrayals. Like, in season 1 she felt like the perfect foil to Jeff, constantly denying his advances and sort of just showing that he is fallible as a character, and I think she was really good at that, and it made her getting with him at the end of the paintball episode all the more satisfying. It's just, you know, once that was not needed after season 1, she sort of just became the whiny social justice tart, and I do enjoy her as that as well. Like, especially in episodes like Basic Email Security, where she's just sort of a massive hypocrite in every single thing that she does while trying to act like the most righteous person in the room. I get a lot of comedy out of that. So, you know, while she is a bit flip-floppy in the way that she acts a lot of the time, and some of her lines in episodes that aren't focused on, like, you know, activism can fall a bit flat for me, I do really appreciate how they managed to get her to work in pretty much every single season in one way or another. Next is Elroy, who is pretty much just a victim of not being in the show enough. Like, I'm sure if he was introduced earlier, he'd be a lot higher up the list, but, you know, even with what we got from him, I think there's plenty to love. You know, he was the perfect older male character to introduce for season 6. His obvious highlight comes from the wedding episode, where he confesses to being a white person encourager in one of the oddly sweetest scenes from the entire show for me, and the setup to the cousin marrying joke I think might be one of my favourites out of the entire show. So yeah, I just think he's quite adorable, really. I really hope that he can turn up for the movie so we can get a bit more of him. And yeah, well, I can't really justify putting him any higher, you know, like I said, I just love everything about him. Next is Jeff, who, as the main character, I do think he works as a really good anchor for the rest of the cast, you know, constantly pulling them together and always having really impactful speeches. It just feels like there's a few occasions where he really doesn't get treated in the fairest way, like he'll get way too little punishment for something that he very obviously did wrong, or especially at the start of season 3 when Pierce comes back, he gets pushed out of the group way too harshly, and I absolutely hate things like that where people are just treated badly based on things that didn't really have, you know, that sort of thing really doesn't work for me. But away from that, I think he's a very good leader for the group. Like, as someone who absolutely would not take a leadership role, I would absolutely follow him in more ways than one, of course. It's just, you know, those few times where his character just isn't treated the best really stick out to me and sort of keep him from getting even further up the list, personally. Next is Pierce, who probably should have been retired before season 5. Like, he was really underutilized for very well-known reasons in season 4, but you know, the 3 seasons before that I think were really good for him, like especially in season 1 where he took a quite natural father role in the group, especially for Jeff, I think was really sweet to see. And even though that was sort of defocused in seasons 2 and 3, I still think he was constantly funny, you know. Obviously his jokes are quite horrific a lot of the time, but you know, at least as someone who can vouch for the gay jokes, I could always get a real laugh out of him. You know, I find a lot of comedy when the joke is, look at how horrible this person is being. So when he was constantly slagging off the gays, especially when his father turned up, you know, I got a lot of joy out of that personally. So obviously his sort of humour in the show doesn't work for everyone, but for me at least it worked perfectly fine, and I found him to be a real bright spot in a lot of season 2 and 3 episodes, just because he'd turn up, be the worst person possible, and just disappear again. You know, I get a lot of joy out of that, so yeah, you know, that shtick was becoming a bit sort of thin by the end of season 3, so maybe it worked out in the end that Chevy Chase is a bit of a dick. Next is Buzz Hickey, who felt like the perfect replacement for Pierce in season 5. You know, he reassumed a lot of Pierce's more fatherly role from season 1, but in a much more subdued and tough love sort of way that I really appreciated. Like, I think my highlight episode for him was the one where he imprisoned Abed in his office for ruining his day. Like, that felt like something that was really new for the show, and getting to see Abed knock down even one peg and seeing someone not immediately accept him for who he is, but instead having to learn and get to know him over the course of the day, that was just really interesting for me. And I think there were a lot of layers to Buzz that I think were perfectly explored within his short time on the show, and obviously it helped that he was constantly funny. You know, he's kind of fish out of water, and some of the suggestions for solving the problems he encountered got a huge laugh out of me. But at the same time, if he stuck around for season 6 and we missed out on Elroy, I think that would have been a shame. So yeah, I think we got the exact amount of time that we needed with Buzz. Next is Troy, who, despite being this relatively high on the list, I feel like I'm still being a bit harsh towards him, because I feel like the general consensus is that he's the funniest character on the show, and you know, like pretty much every other character, he does have loads of funny lines. It's just sometimes I feel like his delivery can be a bit shouty and almost unnatural feeling in a way that doesn't really click with me as well, so I feel like I just can't think of him as the funniest personally, but I still love him in loads of other aspects. Like the way that he'll constantly fall in love with a female and then out of love with a female, I found very interesting in an amusing way, and obviously his friendship with Abed is one of the cutest things in the show. And despite him being a jock and me very much not being a jock, I do find I can relate to him a lot, in the sense that he's constantly very optimistic and wanting to find out more about the world and experience more things, and that's sort of how I feel a lot of the time. So I do still feel a good connection to him, and obviously it's a massive shame that he had to drop out in the middle of season 5. Like, if he got to the end, I feel like I'd appreciate his character way more, just by virtue of him getting to know, like, your Elroy and getting to know Buzz better. I feel like that would have done wonders for his character, but yeah, even with what we got of him in the end, I still really adore him. Next is Abed, the literally me character. I really don't have anything to say that's not already been said about him. His consistent referential humour and the way that he'll constantly weird out the group while not even realising it is incredibly funny and endearing to me. I do feel like there are a couple times where he does go a bit too far. Like the Freaky Friday episode in season 4, I really didn't take to. I think that might actually be my least favourite in season 4, surprisingly enough, just because him forcing a Freaky Friday situation with Troy felt super out of character and annoying, with the fact that they just wouldn't give it up until the end. So I do feel like he does go a bit too far sometimes, but when he's just actually trying to connect with the other characters, I just can't help but adore him. And on a more personal note, especially after watching the show, I feel a lot more comfortable with seeing my life through the lens of a TV show. Like, obviously I don't mean in the same delusional way that Abed does, I just mean in the sense that, you know, sort of compartmentalizing people that I meet and events that I go through, like basically at the very least giving them all a fandom wiki page. I feel like that really helps me, I don't want to say get through things, but just sort of understand things and be able to think through them in an efficient way. You know, at least for me. Like, obviously I can't recommend that to everyone, but just the way that Abed sees the world, I can really connect to now, especially since I've more properly established myself with that sort of thought process, if that makes sense. So I feel like the more time goes on, the more special Abed feels to me. Next is the Dean, who I am so glad snatched up Duncan's chair in season 6 so that I'd have a chance to talk about him here. He is definitely the funniest character in the show for me. Like, every single time he appeared on screen, I got so excited just getting ready for what he would do to make me laugh. And what else is there about him? He's not gay. He likes Jeff. I always liked his relationship with Jeff. Apart from in season 4 where it got genuinely creepy, but at the same time they did absolutely nothing with it. The Dean's just not the deepest character in the world, I suppose, but at the same time he never really needed to be as the principal of the show, so yeah, I just absolutely love him, just because of how genuinely hilarious he is. Next is Frankie, who I can totally appreciate is not everybody's cup of tea. Like, the fact that she came in the final season wanting to turn pretty much everything and everyone on its head and represented the more serious side of saving a school, like, that's quite understandably alienating to not only the characters but the audience. It's just when she had her conversation with Abed, getting to know him in episode 1, I was just like, whoop, mother, and did not look back from there. I think she played such a brilliant straight man the entirety of the season, just desperately trying to properly react to every bit of information that she learned about from the previous 5 years. Like, she just felt so perfect to me, and obviously the fact that she still played such a motherly role for the group and genuinely wanted to help, and by the end was really connecting with everyone and was showing such a sweet side to her, I just found incredibly endearing, and I just absolutely adore her. And despite the fact that you might be able to tell that I appreciate Shirley more, I do think she played a better role than Shirley would have in season 6 because of the way that the school was being improved by that point. I do think that Frankie being a lot more no-nonsense and genuinely helping to fix the school was what the show needed. So yeah, I just utterly adore her. So yeah, number 1 is Shirley, the motherest of all mothers. I just adore the way she so warmly embraces the group all the time and is so genuinely invested in helping them through their problems. I love her relationship with her family and her on-again, off-again relationship with her husband. I found incredibly interesting, even though it was a shame that it didn't work out in the end. Just, yeah, everything about her works for me. I do understand if people are turned off by her overwhelming religiousness, but for me it's in the same way that I can laugh at Britta being an activist and Pierce just generally being an ist. I just find it sort of farcically over the top, the way that she's constantly religious, especially during all the Christmas episodes. Like, I just appreciate that she wants to represent general family values, and that even if it's in a superficial way, by the end of her time on the show, she has broadened those values in a good way. Like, I just adore her so much. She is everything that I wanted out of the motherly character in this show. So yeah, that's every character sufficiently ranked. I do hope my points came across well enough. Like, obviously each character has so many highlights throughout their time that I couldn't have possibly mentioned them all, but I hope that I condensed it down well enough to a sufficient reason to like each and every one of them in the way that I do. You know, and just in general, I hope that my love for the show came across. Like, I think that every single season, even season 4, has plenty to love about it, and I'm so excited for the movie whenever we get that, and just, yeah, this is such a special show that I don't think we're going to see anything similar to in the near or far future, so I think just any chance to appreciate it should really be taken. But yeah, if you have any questions or concerns, do let me know. Just, I think my favourite out of all the seasons has to be 1. Like, I know it's not generally seen as the most popular, but like I said, I appreciate all the soapy love stuff. I think it's the most grounded out of all the seasons, which at the very least appeals to me, and, you know, it has the most explicit nude Jeff scene, so yeah, what's not to love? Bye-bye. Have a nice day.